PR Connections Radio presents.
Hey, we've got another great show for you today. Stay tuned.
Voices of humanity, we need to hear your voices. We need to hear your voices.
Hi there. Welcome to prconnectionsradio.com. The show is called Voices of Humanity at prconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media. Thank you for joining us. It's a very special show. Say a warm welcome to my guest, Lori Simonovic. Hey, Lori, everybody clap her up. She's going to tell you just a little bit about herself. But before that, I just wanted to give a couple of shout outs. One to Jelly Social, amazing group, a lot of networking going on with Jelly Social, a couple of friends of mine, and I just collaborate with them on a few things. And also, there's another wonderful one, Local Street. And Local Street, that's here in Ontario. And I want to just shout out to these wonderful people. If you want to network, if you want to learn some great and have to get some good information as you're doing your networking, they do a lot of promotion and stuff. I would really love you to join them, find out about them. And I'll put them on the link to the shows because they're really wonderful partners of mine. And the next thing is, of course, I'm your host, Sandra McKechnie, and in case a lot of you don't know what double consciousness is, it has to do, it's two streams of thought, two social identities, has everything to do with the people that came across the trade, transatlantic slave trade, whether it was apartheid, colonization, imperialism, all of that, and how they show up, why they show up, how they show up in the 21st century. We offer trainings, learnings, double consciousness fundamentals, double consciousness advance, and there's another one that is, we handpick people for this one, double consciousness meets the faith. Please be in touch. I would really love to hear from you if you feel that you're a fit for the show. Welcome, Lori. Welcome. So I wondered if you could just, for those of you who don't know who Lori is and what she does, just pick out some points, Lori, and just give it to them.
Sure. This light keeps going out. I'm not sure why. Okay, it's working now. I'm the president of Get Braver Incorporated, and it's a DEI consulting and training organization. And basically what we do is we have threshold conversations where people come together and we learn new ways of thinking, thoughts, emotions, spoken words and then that leads to action. And that's usually in the context of training. We also do content creation and curation. And some of the topics might include things like daily impact of macroaggressions, identifying, power relations in organizations, and finding different ways of communicating so that people feel valued and feel like they belong. That would be kind of a very simplistic way of looking at it. I have a website. It's getbraver.com.
Getbraver.com.
Yeah, and it's under construction, but it'll be finished soon.
Yeah. It's like an ongoing thing, these websites.
Yeah.
I know. And Lori is actually an incredible researcher. Her body of work is really what we've been sharing for the last couple of series. We've done a few shows, this might be the 10th one. But we are here and we just are really passionate about her work. Is sympathetic in many ways with mine. We are different, but we have sameness, and this enough, just we want to give you some of that sameness because we are both passionate about many things. And the body of her work is really the focus of the shows that we're doing lately. So it's a kind of a series that we're following through with, and we'll keep going with it because it seems that people, this is something that we feel, and from the feedback, that people really want this content. So on we go. And this is her work. It's not published yet, right, Lori? This is an unpublished piece. So we want to make sure. And you are going to publish, right?
Yes. I'm working on that. You're inspiring me to make it richer.
Oh, I think it's going to be fabulous.
You will definitely get a mention.
Oh, yeah, it's wonderful stuff, and it resonates with me, as you know. All right, so we can just do a little capsulate the last show a little bit through this wonderful paragraph here. I'm actually looking at the work, and so I don't misquote anything, and then just give you guys the meat and potatoes. Here we are. As I become conscious of the types of power that dominate, I simultaneously try to transform that power in concrete, applicable terms. This process is fraught with complexities and difficulties.
Sorry?
Eh?
I didn't hear you. I missed the word.
Oh, did you? Oh, can you guys hear me okay? You can hear me?
Maybe it's my computer. I apologize.
Oh, that's okay. I'm going to start again. As I become conscious of the types of power that dominate, I simultaneously try to transform that power in concrete, applicable terms. This process is fraught with complexities and difficulties. I commit to behaving courageously with grace and love. It is okay and healthy to be angry, but injustice and oppression, for example, that anger can guide me. You know what I'll do? I'll stay close to the further up there, because I think that's really important in terms of finding, understanding power. As I become conscious of the types of power that dominate, I simultaneously try to transform that power in concrete, applicable terms. That part there, definitely. And I commit to behaving courageously with oppression, for example. Right? And today, the title for this one is Acting Up. Acting up. We don't want to act up, but speaking up and taking action. Speaking up and taking action in the face of oppression, what that looks like. So that's why we're covering some of this. Resistance and denial. My silence implies consent and support and support. So we want to just look at some of that today. Okay. So that's the real title, the title of the show. So we wanted to tie that in, the fact that when you are conscious and you see the types of powers that the power that dominates, what does that look like for you? And when you become aware of it, we were talking about it's okay to take breaks. This is where we are in the work. And it's okay to take a break. So you recognize that, oh my gosh, this thing is amazing. It's real. It's hard. It's difficult though. And all these emotions, all these feelings. And you commit to behaving courageously with grace and love as you're doing this work, and no matter how you're feeling. And that's someone that's really committed to this work is going to feel some difficult things, but they commit to behaving courageously with grace and love. And so it's okay to take breaks sometimes. Did you want to add to that, Lori?
Sure. So based upon what you just said in our conversation last night, my understanding is you wanted me to expand a little bit on the taking the break piece.
Yes.
I think in this, I have a propensity, like I mean, as hard as it can be, sometimes there's also joy, and I love this work. And when there's something that has to be accomplished, whether it's a policy or maybe building a business or whatever it is, it takes a lot of time and commitment, not just me, but all of us together. And so I have a propensity to just work long hours because that's what it takes, or at least that's what I'm told it takes, right? And I think that unless I've got it together in terms of my own sense of peace or grace, however I define that in a diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-oppression context, I can't live that if I'm just go and kind of almost dovetail with capitalistic, like super accumulation. Let's do this now, do it as fast as we can, that kind of thing. So part of it is the actual work, which is good work, but part of it is like we get into sort of sometimes even building empires. Maybe it's supposed to just be a small project, maybe it's a big project, we don't know. But the bottom line is, as I said in the piece that you just read, it is fraught with pain, and there is we need time to reflect. Right? So even reflecting is a form of break. So if I move away from a piece that I'm writing or take a break, from an important meeting, not just me, but all of us, then we can come back kind of refreshed. And it's all part of self-care. It allows us as individuals to prioritize our collectively and individually our mental, emotional, physical, political, social, cultural well-being, that we nurture those things too. So, for example, with racism, as important as that work is, that's not like there's much more to say a racial a woman that's self-identifies as Black. There's much more than racism. There's such a richness, right? So if we focus too much, just we have to solve the problem, but there's a self-care component, and that we nurture that. There's also a recharging context where we sometimes we have to step back. Like I get in there and I might call it fierce love, or because as I've said more than once on these podcasts, I have no problem with anger because it separates you from what you don't want, and it's the impetus for change, and that can be like fire to right. I'm just speaking for myself, nobody else. If I stay in that too long, that's going to cave in, and that's not going to my commitment is to grace and love.
Right.
It helps me avoid avoid burnout, where we're consistently engaging with heavy topics without breaks, and that can potentially lead to burnout. Right?
Yes,
So
definitely.
it's
Definitely.
as I said, the piece around perspective and reflection, taking a break provides an opportunity for us to gain perspective, reflect on our experiences, because there are going to be thorny moments, like even in our personal relationships, like we try to figure stuff out, and it's easy for me to get defensive, and my white fragility might come up and go, oops, there it is. And it's not for you to do that work for me. That's for me to do that work and go back and reflect. Personal growth, right? It gives us a break to allow ourselves to engage again in self-reflection and deepen our understandings of ourselves and those with us. So, for example, as I said in one of the other podcasts, like, what am I like with power? What's my history with power? There are many different ways to address that, everywhere from working with a shaman to talking to a priest, whatever your tradition is, to therapy, whatever it is, right? To just, being in groups with women or men and women or various identities and so on. It's also a form of emotional and mental health support where you're balancing your life, where it allows us to seek that support if we need it, and to engage in self-care activities like remembering stuff from my childhood that I love, right? I love painting, even if it's not that great, I do it, right? Great according to somebody else. And that promotes my own emotional my emotional and mental well-being. It also helps me avoid compassion fatigue. And build empathy. I don't think that empathy is just about, oh, well, I get you because, I know what it's like, because I don't know what it's like to be you. But I can maybe, through taking breaks, maintain that empathy and compassion from the perspective of, with your permission or your teachings, say, I get it. And then you might feel that I'm being empathetic because I got it, even though it's not my experience. Right?
Oh, well put.
Thank you. It also contributes to building resilience and collective thrivance, right? So if I'm taking, some people have, I know that's how I was trained. I don't believe in it anymore, but, not to hang out with the people you work. There's reasons for that because of competitiveness, rugged individualism, competition, and that kind of thing. But there are ways to gently and fiercely resist that and to thrive together and find ways to do that. So whether it's like, as I said in one of the other podcasts, to check in at the beginning and the end of the meeting. So if, my parent died and I happen to show up at that meeting, we don't have to unpack it, but you're going to know I'm sad. And that's giving me a break where maybe I perform a little bit differently that particular day. And we give that permission, right? There's also a learning, unlearning, and relearning education process. And in the learning and unlearning, this is not easy work. It has to sink in. And when we take a break, we might have that aha moment when we're actually in the work, but then we just move away from it. But it brings us back to I want to live this, not just in my job. This isn't performative. I want to live this in my life. So anything so when I'm taking a break, I want to see, is my life reflecting all of these values? Am I living it? And if I'm not, depending on what I've learned, then we're going to talk about that later, through various, through language, through healthy resistance, we sustain advocacy. We'd sustain our visions, and it allows for avoiding exhaustion and allowing for long-term commitment and impact in the, I put the word fight, but I don't, sometimes it is a fight against depression. Yeah. Or goal, vision for all of us to belong. So those
Yummy
are
stuff there. Good stuff.
Thank you.
I was thinking, because I think we had spoken about this, we had went over this little paragraph before, and something a little different had come up for me. I commit to behaving courageously with grace and love. And it's interesting because when our Indigenous brothers and sisters and a number of nations that have gone through over the years, times of oppression, depending on where we were, how we were classified. Unfortunately, we know it's nonsense, but it's been sold as, it's been promoted through the ages by some pseudoscientists as to who's on the top, the Eurocentric peoples, and then you have, our Asians, and then you have your Indigenous peoples, you have Blacks at the bottom of the rung. And so even though it's nonsensical, it's the way that it's been perpetuated via the media and through the ages in terms of our consciousness, or being aware of our unawareness around the topic. Some people are aware and some are not. We said this before, it's a lifelong process, right?
Yes.
So unless somebody makes you aware that, wait a minute, we brought stuff with us via, colonization or slavery, or, we're not aware of it. So becoming aware is an amazing thing. But that paragraph there that says, I love it. I commit to behaving courageously. Once we are able to identify, right, conscious of the types of power that dominate, that's difficult. It is really difficult.
It is. It absolutely is. It absolutely is. Sorry, you're going to say something else.
Well, I was going to say, once, to behaving courageously for me is like a friend of mine is adamant about me going to Halifax because we want to do some real deep research, and they have a whole incredible opportunities touring there, looking at our history, a lot of history.
Right.
So I know, even to go on that tour, even to go there for a few days, I have to be courageous. It's a very challenging thing to go through some of this, the museums and so forth, and look at some of this, what happened. And some people just weep because, you can almost experience something very spiritual in these moments.
Yeah.
But so behaving courageously when you are carded, and when there's types of demonization, when the knee's on your neck, is so challenging on a personal level, on a national level. It's very difficult on an ethnic level for us, right? And for our Indigenous brothers and sisters, Koreans, and individuals that I've had on the show that have had experienced that kind of pain. And I think of, and our Indigenous peoples, absolutely, I commit to behaving courageously with grace and love. And honestly, spending time and decompressing with people that aren't, after some of these learnings, we have to decompress. My sister girl and I, we decompress because she just co-hosts with me. And sometimes we're like, oh, we need to go get something to eat. We need to drink a glass of wine. This is like, and the opportunity, even after we do the work, to behaving courageously with grace and love. Oh my goodness. It's about, we really have to saturate ourselves in that. We have to apply it. If not, and look, where is it that, what's triggering me? What's coming up for me? Where do I need healing here? How deep does this go? And it can be really difficult. So for Blacks, Indigenous peoples, a number of groups, behaving courageously and not getting a crusty heart, may I call it, getting anger, all of these things. You were talking about anger. a lot of that is good, but the healing part of that is really important too, and decompressing and being safe in a space to talk to somebody about it.
Well, what comes up for me when you say that, and please lead me back on point if I'm not on point on this one. I agree with everything you're saying, and the only thing that I might add is it's not necessarily like, yes, you always have to heal from something, but and the pervasiveness of racism, for example, on micro and macro level, it's just pervasive.
Mm-hmm.
It's a daily thing, right?
Yes.
And I can't speak to your experience or the person of a person of color's experience, but there's work that I have to do or that we have to do. For example, if you're talking about race around racism, this is a collective piece. This isn't just. So how, I remember reading, I don't remember where, how can I heal from racism? The author was saying, when I'm experiencing it on a daily basis, I can't, I'm constantly getting punched, right?
Mm-hmm.
That they were speaking metaphorically, but that's how it felt, right, to that person, right? So there is that piece, and that's a piece of the tiring piece. So you just talked about some of the things that you do for self-care. And sometimes it's like, there was a piece by Sandra McKechnie. She says, like, stop talking to me. She's a Black woman, about, I believe, about how resilient I am. Talk to me about how you have my back, right? How, you want me to thrive instead of, admiring my strength. Why do I need strength? I need strength because she was experiencing racism, right? So there is that piece, to me, that's an example of healthy resistance to a form of a repression where, yes, of course, Black women are strong. And sometimes that's imposed on people because of racism, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. So in that same paragraph, it talks about when we consciously or unconsciously contribute to the rigid maintenance of hierarchy, competition, and rugged individualism within a structure of imperialistic whiteness, as opposed to the work and labor of love or mutually, I'll go on, but I find there's that mutual word, that reciprocal, where you have someone that you can speak to that is really like yourself. We've had some great conversations that is making an effort to think about this deeply, like to think about this, because there are things that people can relate to that are relatable, that people have gone through that may, it's not the same, but you can certainly think of something that might have been difficult or similar, sympathetic in some way. Because we all have pain and we all have some trauma on some level, right? I would think most people I speak to, whether it's growing up in this generation or something happened to you. But when it comes to this part, I find that it's a challenge. All of the intersections and the things that we go through in a day, whether it's our Indigenous brothers and sisters, Blacks, brown people from India, like how the things that we go through in a day, micros and macros, are incredible.
Yes.
They're incredible. And if you started to mouth off every time one happened, nobody'd want to spend time with you.
Well, that's it. I mean, on the one hand, there's writings like in the white supremacy book I talked about when they were talking about white supremacy and, to amplify voices of people that are experiencing it. But the problem is, you're right. When you speak up, it's dangerous. Yeah. So how do we, or it can be, how do we kind of create an environment where we all belong, and that it's okay to have these, we're going to make mistakes, but it's okay to have these braver conversations. Yes. Like sometimes my knees are shaking, but I still say it, right?
Right. Sometimes I love that. See, knees are shaking, but we still say it. Honestly, because that's sometimes how it feels for us and for other groups, right? So I think that's well put there, because sometimes you do feel like, okay, no, I'm compelled to this truth, and I'm going to be courageous, again, behaving courageously. I commit to that. That I love, because it does take courage, even though people might not think about it, but there's something that happens to your body. You're mustering some stuff up sometimes to get that courage to really, and breathing, your breathing changes. I become very aware of that when I'm doing this.
Right. And sometimes because I'm triggered, like that's something that I work at, is to use the trigger as a learning edge. But because I'm triggered, I don't always use it as a learning edge, and I mess up, and I have to be courageous at that juncture too. Tell me, Lori, that's really messed up. You're acting like the beneficent white woman. I go, oops, thank you. me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or sometimes it's like a big ouch. But that's my work. I don't make it about myself. I just like I go back and that's where the break comes in, maybe later that day. Yeah.
Hmm.
So it sounds like you're leading into speaking up in action. Is that correct? Or am I mistaken?
Yes. Yes. It's okay to take a break sometimes, everybody, whoever's doing this work. It's unnecessary. So speaking up and acting and taking action, speaking up and taking action in the face of oppression, resistance, and denial. My silence implies consent and support. This I find really challenging. Find it challenging with the Caucasians, so called, that I have in my life, as much as they're doing. But as we're all growing together, I find it still a very uncomfortable thing for some people. And it is, it's just uncomfortable for people. And when I watch that discomfort, sometimes I have to be courageous and to address that when I can. I see you're uncomfortable. I get it, but why? Let's talk about it.
Okay, so do you want to talk about the silent consent piece? Because I have about 10 ideas.
Oh, I would love that. Yes.
Okay, so when we choose, like I'm going to say at the beginning, at the end, because we are silent, and I'm not disagreeing with what you just said, doesn't necessarily mean consent.
Okay.
It means we don't have the tool. It could mean we don't have the tools, or it could mean it is consent. It could mean either, but I wrote a bunch of stuff last night. So I want to make sure I'm on the right one here. Right. So if I'm if I'm silent, then it doesn't give us the opportunity to actively challenge biases or discrimination in any way. It's languages and behaviors, and we're actually promoting that whatever is happening in that moment without knowing it. Languages and behaviors in the workplace, a culture of disrespect and a lack of inclusivity. Right? If we do the opposite, if we speak up, then it's potentially contributing toward a culture of respect and inclusivity. If we're silent, advocacy, for example, for diverse representation and inclusion in decision-making processes and ensuring that voices that are not heard, they're not going to be heard, they're not going to be considered. If somebody gets shut down, so for example, I can speak in the gender context. I might have I think I've talked about this before. I have a great idea, or I think it's a great idea. Silence. It's an important room, right? 2 seconds later, a very important quote unquote man in a high position says the same idea and they're all over it. I can't say, didn't I just say that? Because then that's what a lot of women from various social experience, that's a power play. It's a great idea, but it's not going to be yours, even though you said it. So that there are so many ways in terms of micro and macroaggressions where voices are just not considered. So the representation isn't just the body, right? Because you can have somebody we've talked about this before, who has internalized whiteness, or I don't diagnose, by the way, internalize or label internalized whiteness. We all have it, or Eurocentricity. So you might be in a particular body, and you might buy into a particular kind of domination and behave in those ways. And that's all of the unraveling. It doesn't allow, when we're silent, it doesn't allow for courageous conversations, uncomfortable topics. It doesn't allow for the notion of discomfort being a learning tool. And that if you're too comfortable, that maybe you're contributing to the status quo without knowing it, right?
Too comfortable. Yes.
Yeah, because when I get uncomfortable, I'm uncomfortable, but I'm also excited. I'm thinking, there's something here. It's not just a trigger. It's not something from my past. It's something I don't know. And we come to this new place of understanding. If I have this vision and I haven't thought of this particular point, this might be happening in a threshold conversation, for example. it doesn't matter from what location of power. If we're having, flatter conversations where we're really hearing each other and really talking about things like belonging and equity and what that means and defining it in our own context, what our vision is on a larger level or a smaller level, being silent is not going to contribute to that. In supporting and amplifying, as I was saying earlier, the voices of individuals that are experiencing discrimination, are being pushed to the margins, it doesn't give the opportunity for people to share their perspectives, right? That doesn't mean, because there is I remember reading that one person will be chosen, like say a Black person, right? And they get asked to be the Native informant. I'm not talking about that, right? It's about, I remember many years ago, again, as a woman, I was an executive director. I was 29 for a neighborhood office that did multicultural work. And the chair of the board was taking me to all these political meetings, because there's all kinds of stuff that we were doing, raising money. It was a very large neighborhood at the time. It was like, at that time, it was, I don't know, 16,000. Now it's up to about 40,000. And I came into the room. The room was filled with white men. There were two women, myself, a young 29-year-old, and a white woman who called herself alderman. She was an alderman, right? And I thought to myself, oh my God, like I remember, like at what cost? Like, yeah, I have a bit of power, and yeah, I'm trying to contribute to changing and being inclusive in this particular context. And we were just starting to build up money, but if there were more women there, for example, or there were more men that were racialized, it would be a completely different thing. The representation wasn't there. That's starting to slowly change, right? But the amplification of voices isn't about me coming to somebody and saying, yeah, I want to amplify your voice. The voices have to be in the room. So it's representation and the voice and the vision.
Absolutely. Right? That, again, we go back to taking courage, because I think sometimes I challenge a dear friend of mine, white, of course, especially her, others do. But I mean, I challenge her in that, you know what? So it's almost like saying, what did you do today? What did you do this month? Did you, and a lot of times she's right in there, because a conversation will come up, because she gets to go into those places, right? She's having dinner with white people. This is her life. This is her family. And things are said. And of course she jumps in. And sometimes, I'll just, she'll just decompress with me a little bit or tell me what happened. And I'm always sort of very interested. I love that word, committed to being courageous. It does take courage. If we become a little aware of the fact that it's very difficult for Indigenous people to be that courageous. If we understood, and and they can blend in sometimes, maybe because their skin is fair, or whatever. But there's a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage to say something, and a lot don't. And same with us. We want to I just want to raise my family. I don't want any challenges. But it's almost like you lose a part of yourself, though, when you do that.
That does happen, and a lot do. Like Grassy Narrows, there was a peaceful blockade for over 25 years. People could not come through the blockade, and they accomplished a lot. But their bravery and their courage, and there's many, many, many examples like that. And Malcolm X, Martin Luther King.
Those are beautiful ones. Those are right up. It's like,
and it's wasn't just them. There were communities that were guiding them. Right.
And I try and remember that to myself when I think, come on, Sandra, you haven't suffered onto a bloodshot, or you haven't suffered onto blood. Please. I try it helps me a little bit, though it's extreme, to keep certain things in perspective. Take a deep breath, decompress with someone, that I can trust.
Yeah, I'm in no way disagreeing with you. That's part of it. I'm sure all of them, like even Malcolm X at the end of his life, kind of changed his view on who could and should or shouldn't help. There's a whole story on that. I don't have to get into that, but yeah.
Big stuff. Okay, so I think we're making some headway. What was your next point? I was just going
to say, taking a stand, there's ways to take stands against microaggressions. Again, you don't get that opportunity if I'm staying silent, initiating or participating in various forms of, courses, conversations, collaborating with, I've done all this stuff because most of my career has been doing this kind of work, with HR departments, looking at language, engaging in allyship that's not colonial, right? That's not
Oh
going.
my goodness. We were talking about courage, something before it leaves my mind. I was thinking when I go to the chiropractor sometimes and he's doing some good work, and honestly, I didn't even believe in them before, but I started to feel so much better. And my alignment was off, and just putting his elbow like on my spine and shifting and getting things back in a line. I'll tell you, that was horrible. But
relief, yeah.
It really did a lot for me. I was walking differently and it just felt better. And, and then I stayed away for a while, and I shouldn't have, I spent it like all or nothing. I went to nothing, which at least, Sandra, you should be going once a month. It should be more than that, but once a month even. Now, honestly, I was thinking of the courage that it takes to do certain things in life, just everyday things. It takes courage to actually, when he's doing that adjustment, sometimes I want to hit him. He said, "Hit me, go ahead, hit me." Because it is painful. Yeah. And sometimes even just when I know there's a certain group, maybe I'm booked to do this, training, learning, and maybe yesterday's session didn't go great. And here I am again. I'm thinking, okay, I need courage because, like you mentioned, Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm Little, aka Malcolm X, courage all over the place with some of our elders and forefathers. So that to me,
and when we choose to be courageous, it also closes a lot of, for example, white doors, or because a lot of women have internalized patriarchy. And buy into that system, capitalism, and so on. I'm not saying I don't completely buy into it, but anyway, there are doors that we shut, and I'm not scared of that anymore. But there was a time as a younger woman where I was just trying to make my way. I still did it. It was still very shaky. I thought, no, you've got to make this decision. Sometimes I found myself that, what are you doing? You're putting your job on the line, right? And I thought, well, you've got so much experience even now. Like, you can get another job. Like, what's going on here is unfair. Like, let's change this policy. Right. And sometimes you have to move on, and sometimes you stay. But as I said in more than one session, I am in this work. I am meant to work myself out of a job if I'm in a position of power. Right. Yeah. To me, that's the ultimate test. Wouldn't that be great? That we didn't have to.
Most definitely. I wanted to hit this next point. Be careful to not, can you elaborate on this? Be careful to not turn becoming an ally, I think we had touched on this a bit, into a colonial project, consciously or unconsciously. Why we should be aware of that?
Okay. Well, I think it's no different than speaking up, right? Are we speaking up for the so-called other? Are we othering people? So we, in terms of the ally piece, I mean, I've co-facilitated, and in fact, I'm co-writing a course now with a colleague. Just to give you a simple example, I don't think she'd mind me speaking to this. Very powerful woman, a lot of power on many levels. And she said, "Lori, like, remember we were doing the course, I get some points together. What do you think?" Right? I said, "I can do that if you want me to do that. But the bottom line is we're going into a particular context, in an Indigenous context. And the first thing well, we already have a relationship, thank God, but is building the relationship, right? Like, what is my place? Why am I there? Right? And really, having the knowledge as much as possible." I said, "I'm happy to write up some points based on work we've done together before, but the bottom line is her context and it's her people, right? So if I'm going to be an ally and I'm being invited, it's not static." And I was saying that to her, and she knows that. She was glad I was saying that, because I want to live those values. So even when I'm being asked to work on a project, how is it going to be helpful? Like, what is the purpose? Like, what is your definition of success? What is your vision? Because there are like right now in Canada, I think there's 600 nations. And while there are some common pieces, there are also some very different pieces, right, in each nation. So depending on what we're going in, there's going to be stuff around colonization that there's a place to meet, and that maybe I can play a role, but I have to get direction from her and her people.
Absolutely.
If it's colonial, then it's kind of like, people that look like me, which I've already said that, has made this incredible mess, which still exists. Promises still haven't been kept for many communities, including Black communities, right? And then I'm going to go in there, "Oh, let me help you fix it," right? That's kind of a colonial ideology, right? Is that kind of what you're asking, or are you asking
Well,
something?
yeah, even in that, I remember I had mentioned to you, even if when people come on the show, and they're white, and it's like sort of degree to the ninth, lovely, taught beautifully, and that's wonderful. I love it. I love the information. I have so much information, and sometimes I wonder, really, and you put words to it. Is this a colonial project for you, or are you really in it to win it? Like, and in the back of my mind, right? Because the information's amazing. But I always say to things like people, on one of my trainings, learnings, I'm guys have heard this before, that, okay, so what's the action now? How are you acting courageously as you're helping this people or this group? What are you doing? Your books, okay, you've got to make a living, but what are you doing about the books that you're selling, and you're selling to the Black community? There's these tangible things, and I love that. They want the books, sell them by all means. Are they getting a discount? Are you historically versed on how economically, you know what I mean? In a multi-generational way, that how important it is for them to get that discount. Are you versed? Is your action, are you just not all the stats and everything? Are you familiar with where we are coming from and coming back into the 21st century? Did you go through the time warp, right? And how that looks, and how our men really look like today, and what the lies that have been told about our men and our families, and all of the information. You don't have to have
and whose story? Sorry for interrupting. And whose story is it to tell?
Yeah.
Right. If it's not my story to tell, if somebody decides the allyship is over, even if I've written a book, right, co-written, right, if it's not my story to tell, then I have, no matter how painful that might be, I have to back out, because it's not my story to tell.
Yeah.
These are just examples of, like, both the kind of complex, messy moments, but also, there are some goals that I have a whole course on this that I might want to think about. And then when you start thinking from an intersectional lens, where you take in various forms of oppression, there are various things to think about.
Right. Yes.
And I think what you're also saying is your heart in it. I'm not feeling your heart, I'm feeling your head, right?
Yeah, and a lot of language, and it's wonderful language. I love it. You got to have some language so we know where we're all landing.
Because if we're talking about a capitalistic system, Bell Hooks, and I think it's in the Teaching to Transgress, in that book, she talked about how a lot of her colleagues, she got a PhD, but a lot of the women that she was working with were women from the Black community, from various racial communities that were racialized as other, and they were teaching in the university system. And all of a sudden, diversity became, and there's different languages for it, like the women's department and so on, became very popular and started becoming lucrative. So now, all of a sudden, like, a PhD was required. They set up all the curriculums. They did all the groundwork. And from my perspective, is a PhD in that context a bona fide requirement, right? And I think she didn't use that language, but I think she's saying no, not necessarily, right? Because there's economic reasons. There's so many factors, and so unfortunately, a lot of white women and men took up a lot of space. And women, the women that were doing the work and the civil rights work, were pushed out of the universities. And she openly talks about that in the book. Which is, to me, that's colonial. Even if they don't want to be colonial, if you're pushing people out, right, consciously or not, you're contributing to colonial allyship. One is, not you.
It's challenging when you say that. I remember there's a gentleman, I had mentioned him before, Dr. Neely Fuller. and love his work. Very difficult for other groups to really listen to him. But one of the things he did, he had a white gentleman, Tim Wise, who's been doing activist, been doing this work a long time, spoke out when his black friends could not speak at that time. But one of the most interesting things is he challenged him on the show. And in other words, I'm going to sum it up. He was saying, well, yeah. And I don't think Tim Wise expected this at all. But he said to him, okay, you've got all this good stuff, books, making some dough, whatever. What's in it for you? What's really in it for you? Can we trust you? I loved the show because I thought he just asked him, plain talking.
Yeah, and I've had a moment like that in a particular group, and I was willing to answer it. And then one of the leaders, I was the only white woman in the room, and they're wondering why I was there. So I was willing to speak to it. And but then somebody else said, "No, you're putting her on the spot." I said, "I'm willing to do it." She said, "No, this is not appropriate," because she it was going to be too aggressive. And so I just respected, I ended up, leaving, and because I was asked to leave. I told you this before. It was one of the other videos, but those are the kinds of questions, like this guy that you spoke about. Did he respond?
Oh, he did. Tim Wise responded, and he did a beautiful job. In essence, he's like, probably not on so many levels, because I came through the time warp and it was passed to me, and it's in me. The supremacy, that whole thing that I've got to deal with every day is in me. And I'm doing this.
That's honest, eh?
Yeah. And I actually respected him a lot for that. So I think this is the other challenge. Sometimes people aren't willing to speak to that. Not that they have to tell me, but are you willing, to say something or to be honest, or are you there yet? Because you could know the work in here, but have you done the work in here in terms of your implicit or explicit stuff that has been passed to you? And so that is a bit of a challenge, especially when you look in some of the areas of management and the echelons, that it's difficult because it comes out there. It comes out in those dominant areas, right? In business.
Because you're rewarded to dominate. You're rewarded to bring in the money.
Absolutely. And that's where it's really difficult. But I was just thinking of how much courage, and I would encourage those that are so-called white. It takes courage to for a person of color, or whatever the person that has been oppressed for multi-generations, whatever that group is, whatever that face looks like, for them to handle some of this and still end up smiling, and feeling great and making you feel better, which should not be the case. So in feeling like they sort of they come on a call with you and you have to worry about you being offended. That's really challenging when it comes to courage in doing this work as well. But there's some people that just take that courage, girl, and they're gone. Like Dr. Joy DeGruy, who is amazing. She just does.
Oh, I love her.
Right? Gosh, she was here. She was actually in the city and had a live call. It was amazing. She came in live, but it was a live, and I got the link and I couldn't even get in. But anyway.
I used her work for a cultural competence course. It's brilliant.
Right? So, and she has had such moments of genuine, where she's had to muster up courage. And now she's up there doing her thing. But it is hard for us I love that we can speak up. We're encouraging people to speak up, and it can be, and the courageous part, I think, is a huge component. Don't you? Like that you can be courageous. You can do it. Especially if it's something, if you have the knowledge behind it. What do you think about that? Like if you have some knowledge behind that.
So what is the question?
Like it's the courage part, like our title here, speaking up, and taking action is easier. Do you think when you have some knowledge behind it?
I think it's knowledge. I think it's habit. I think it's like you said, everybody's got a story, and a lot of us fake it. right? Till we make it. And I'm not talking about like making a job or anything. I'm talking about
Yeah.
really making it authentically. And to be authentic is not really encouraged. And in this particular context, it's not really encouraged. You're seen as different, or like you could have been rich, you could have done this, you could have done that. That's not something that I'm interested in, right? You know yourself, then and you know what you believe in. So part of it is the knowledge, but and the communities that I'm being guided by, it's also my own internal spiritual, emotional, physical, mental, relational work. Like, what is my vision? Like uh, I had to compete, for example, just to get jobs in the system, right?
Yeah.
So I had to have enough of that. But if I had too much of that, I know that my soul would not be at ease. So knowing where you're going, and I'm not going to go to Winnipeg if I want to go to Florida. Like, what's my direction? I won't get there. I won't get to Winnipeg if I keep going to Florida. There might be much more money there, right? I'm just
Absolutely.
sense, right? But it's, where do I want to go? And sometimes Winnipeg's cold. I've been there. I did so yeah.
Wow, I agree. I'm going to move on a little bit to see if we can we're almost going to be out of time. But again, our title for today's show is Speaking Up and Taking Action in the Face of Oppression. My silence implies consent and support. And some people may disagree with that. Now, if we were to kindly sort of do a little push back on people that, with respect, of course, that disagreed with that their silence implies consent and support, what might we kind of, why would their silence may denote, that they're they're collaborating on some unconscious level?
So you're saying why?
Like the speaking up and acting out, my silence implies consent and support. That might be obvious to some, but I just wondered if, we could say.
Well, I think, again, you look at intent and impact. So the impact, the silence in many, many situations, all the stuff that we talked about. So even if it's not my intent, that's what I'm contributing to. Having said that, like, I love the grace that you're giving to this situation. Sometimes people are silent because they're scared, because they have a mortgage, because they're broke. Like, there could be 1,000 reasons. I'm just making stuff up. It could be anything, because emotionally they can't handle it yet. And that it's not necessarily consent. And in not construing it as that, it's opening. Right. And that opening it opens the door to challenge silence gently. Because, I've said to people, and I've said this before in the classroom, that while we encourage dialogue, silence is also another way of learning. Right.
Absolutely. Right? So, absolutely.
And
I got to remember that for myself when I'm in a conversation, with others. That's really important. Silence, definitely. Even though I'm aware of it, sometimes it's like, I want to get in there.
I want to listen more. I'm not doing it today, but I want to listen more than I'm talking. And with that opening, when I invite people that have been silent, sometimes they want to speak up, but people like me are taking up too much space, right?
Well, you got to take up some space so the people know the work.
So, facilitator, part of my job is to invite people who have been silent, not to shame them, but to invite them and to actively challenge this and gently, hopefully, that silence, and promote open dialogue. Because maybe people have been silent so much. I think, I can say, I'm promoting, I don't even like the way I'm saying it. We want to promote the amplification of voices.
Yes.
Well, people are tired, man. Like, it's time.
I know.
So, like, you got to consider that too. And when people, I was just watching something on TikTok again. The guy said, white people say all the right stuff, and they say, thank you for bringing that to my attention. But later he gets punished. Right?
Yeah.
That
is a perfect example.
Yeah, you've got to see whether that culture is actually cultural humble, whether it is actually like that. People assess that immediately, whether it is safe, whether there is room for braver conversations, and whether what are the steps that we're taking together towards fostering a more inclusive, equitable, and all all belonging environment.
It's true, and that has happened. And unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever, the skin is white. A lot of that happens, and there's this sort of psychoanalytical thing that happens, and I don't even think people are aware of it. You know, that all of a sudden now they're writing something down, like you said. All of a sudden now you're being written up.
Doors are being closed.
Yes, it's incredible how that it's very polite. That's why Canada people say we're always so polite, eh?
We think we are.
And I had to be, yeah, but it's just sanitized because there's stuff underneath there. You know, I told you that story about just a nice gentleman that my friend went to Pickering to purchase this house. And he's talking to the agent, and she's there. She's Black, you know, there with her husband, and could hear this man saying, well, I don't sell to niggers, you know. So this kind of thing is, but I'm sure that man sits down and will probably work with Blacks, work with all nations of people. And very polite, but there's that stuff that we've brought through the time warp that always challenges me. And these are people that are managers and supervisors and directors of and handle human beings. But I've seen some rough treatment there, Lori.
Sorry?
I've seen some rough treatment. Master psychologist.
It has a very kind of double edge. There's a purpose for that politeness, right? I'm not talking about, one of the things that I like about the British is they don't want to embarrass people. So there is like a value in that, right? Because we're kind of, a lot of roots from Canada are British. Having said that, it's also a way that we control people. Well, you're not being polite.
Right.
Allowed to be angry. So men are allowed to be, Bell Hooks talks about in the book, The Will to Change. She did a project on men, and, men are allowed to be angry, but women aren't, and so on. And she was talking within the Black community specifically. And so that politeness is a way to teach people how to behave and stay in line, right? So there is a...
Oh my goodness. We are out of time. I know. You jot a note down for that. Jot a note down so we don't forget, because honestly, I think I loved it. We're going places here, and I hope it was good for you as it was for us today. We have a little commercial for you, and we'll be right back.
Okay.
So you have not subscribed. So don't just comment or say it to me or send me an email. Subscribe to the channel. Here's what I do. I offer cultural sensitivity and awareness trainings, learnings called Double Consciousness. Those are amazing trainings. They are challenging, but they're amazing. And the feedback is great from these. It looks at people that came across the sub-Saharan trade, transatlantic slave trade, apartheid, colonization, in relationship. This is in relationship to all people. This concerns everybody. We all have these biases and things that were instilled from generation to generation, and we just think, oh, that's just how I am. Well, it's also how somebody else was and has been passed to you. It is not your fault or mine, but together we can do something about it. So those are the trainings, learnings, and out of that came my video podcast, Voices of Humanity, at prconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media. Very proud of this little video podcast. The guests are fantastic. People come on with their genuine selves, just really looking at who they are, what they are in relationship to their biases. People tapping into their conscious unawareness, becoming aware first that they're unaware. I have a Korean brother that came on, my indigenous sister that gave us some real understanding of how her people, what lens they look through, and what is hurtful, what is offensive, just so that we can be aware of each other in the 21st century and treat each other well. So if you are in the upper echelons of management and maybe you get complaints and arbitration, you would like things to change, look at my trainings, look at the video podcast, Voices of Humanity. And the third offering that I have is my coaching. I'm a certified life coach endorsed by the International Coaching Federation, and I coach in the same area, double consciousness, anti-bias coaching, equity. I'm looking at all of these things in coaching, and what are your needs as I partner with you, especially if you're management and you really need that opportunity to tap into your conscious unawareness. And you'll be amazed how wonderful this can be and how it can change things for you. And the coaching, the other area I coach in is also women that have had extreme challenges in their lives, extreme challenges. and want to leverage all of that into living their best life. And I would really love to hear from you. Subscribe, share, like. I appreciate you. Remember, it's not your fault or mine, but together we can do something about it. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.
It is not your fault or mine, but together we can certainly do something about it. Lori and I, that's what we're doing here. Lori, thank you for coming once again. We'll be back. We won't be back next week because we both have something, but we will be back, and we look forward to spending another Voices of Humanity at purconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media, with you. Thank you so much for your time. Take care.